Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Today's main topic, we'll jump right in today on the main topic, but we'll have some news here in a minute. The main topic today is we're going to do like a what if scenario. Imagine if, kind of what we're going to go here. Imagine if you are adopting Copilot Standalone for Power BI. What does this look like for your organization? How are you using it? And what does it look like for you to roll this out? So kind of just putting yourself in the place of the BI leader or admin and trying to figure out how do you communicate this to your organization? Where do you communicate its value? And how do you roll it out? So that's kind of what we're thinking here for the Copilot Standalone as an option for your organization. With that, Tommy, you want to do any introductions or news items?
Yeah, you know what? Summer's upon us. Tomorrow is in Chicago. It's our last day of schools tomorrow. And with an 8, a 6, and a 4, it can be a little hard to think about how to keep them busy, so to speak. Because if you go back to my summers, if you go back to my summers, which I would change, it was Sports Center, 2 bowls of cereal, followed by the same Sports Center, followed by Nintendo. So I don't want to do that to them, kind of thing. So Mike, let me start off with you. What good tips do you have? We're Power BI tips, Fabric tips, but what parent tips do you have for us for the summer?
Well, it's a lot harder for me because I'm in my basement all summer, right? So I'm here at my house. I've been here for many like months throughout the summer. So like, yeah, like we do a lot of like adventure-y things, kind of, I guess, nearby adventures. There's a lot of like museums. There's like some kids museums that are kind of interactive. Parks seem to be a thing. Thankfully, my wife is able to stay home and she's able to kind of like take care of kids and make sure they got to go places. There's a little bit of Friends thing going on. There's an age bracket, though, where kids start getting old enough to start doing work and things. So last summer, we had my son working at a restaurant nearby, and that kind of really occupied a lot of his time. It actually kept us kind of close to home, honestly. When we're working around his work schedule, he'd work on weekends and weekdays. So there was like some additional scheduling thing there that he had to be busy with that. It wasn't something like we were able to like step away for long periods of time from our family or area because we needed to do some work. So I think we're going to start seeing a little bit more of this. I'm in the teenager age group a little bit. I've got a 13 and a 15. And I think you're going to start seeing them do a little bit more of their own Friends experience, maybe more so this summer than last summer. And we're also seeing a little bit more work creep in there as well. So when I was really little, it was, just kind of bebop around the house and get bored and try and find friends to play with who are also bored. That was kind of my. What kind of neighborhood did you grow up in? Did you grow up in a neighborhood where you could go out and have friends, or did you grow up in a neighborhood that didn't have that nearby?
There's a lot of games on the street, and so that was a total thing for us. When we first moved from New York, there's a lot of places on the street. Then we moved to we'll call a slightly older neighborhood, so it got a little harder. But then it was like you just had to find people to bike to. But it's interesting with what you're saying with 13, 15, because the job's definitely got to be a part of that. You got to keep them busy.
Well, they want to go get like these fancy clothing things or these new Nintendo Switch stuff, and I'm like, I'm okay with you that, but you got to earn that stuff, man. Like I'll buy you some stuff, but like I'm not going to go buy you the most expensive everything all the time. You got to earn a little bit of that. Put some skin in the game on this.
Exactly. So one thing we started doing last year is I don't want to just tell my kids, here's the work you're going to do it. Because if that was me, I'm going to go the other direction. So I wrote a contract, and the contract entails this, we call it the summer contract. And it's, if you want to watch TV, Nintendo, kind of thing, you have to achieve these following things before you do that.
Oh, I do like that. We don't have a contract for this, but we do the same thing. Like there's like a list of chores and things that got to get done and signed off on. I've often contemplated building like a power app where my kids could like do their chores and take a picture of it when they're done. And that way I know it's actually completed. Because right now they'll say, oh yeah, it's done. I'm like, I don't think it's done to my standards yet.
So, but the thing that I'm trying to teach them with this too is come back, like for example, like 30 minutes of math, 30 minutes of learning Italian, 30 minutes of reading, chapter book, whatever. But what I said is go read it, come back to me if you disagree with anything before you sign it. Because once you sign it,
So the expectation.
yeah, you signed it. Once you sign it, you signed it. So my oldest, I know I need to work on more on the art of negotiation. My middle one who signed it, or before she signed, she's like, hey, there's a lot more I have to do than what I get. I went, okay, well, then we'll work with this kind of thing because I want them to own it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Rather than me telling them. So it's worked well because they signed it. It's not just me telling them to do. Granted, did they have much of a choice? Yeah, I didn't say that, but so it's
It's a
worked out pretty well.
negotiation a little bit. I mean,
It's
there's
negotiation, but
yeah.
they own it, kind of thing. So yeah, that's how we kind of keep them busy during the summer. But yeah, our lives don't change that much. We're still in the fabric, dived into all these new things. I mean, it's just more louder kids at the house.
Our spouses, I think, take the brunt of this a lot more than we do.
Yes.
Like in this space, because we have to like close doors, come downstairs, focus on things. Like I feel like it doesn't change. And so I think something too is like when my both my parents were teachers. So when I was a kid growing up, I had both parents like just stop. I mean, they would do other odds and end jobs, maybe around through the summer. My dad did electrician, helped out with an electrician or did some help jobs here and there. But like when we were kids, like my parents were there all the time because they were both off for the summers. It's different now that I work all year round and there's no like summertime for me. So I think it's also a little bit interesting when kids are like, when do you take a break? I'm like, I don't take a break. You just keep going. That's how it works.
I'm like, when do you stop eating? So
yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen. Like we just keep going through the things. So anyways, very interesting stuff. Good conversation there. All right. If you have any comments of things that you are planning to do as a family throughout the summer or you do with your family units, let us know in the chat. Let us know what kind of activities do you do? Maybe you can give us some ideas. I will say this summer, we're doing something a little bit unique. My son is really interested in computers and computer science. He's like, I want to start learning some of this stuff.
awesome.
So very fun and interesting for me, because this is a space that I'm very interested in it. Last night, as I was going to sleep, my wife was watching something on like Instagram or whatever. And I'm sitting there reading about Duck Lake or another database
DuckDB?
system.
Yeah.
DuckDB, but now there's a Duck Lake, apparently. There's another thing on it. And I'm like, someone sent an article. I'm reading this whole thing. I'm like internalizing. I'm like, okay, interesting. And my wife started talking to me like, I'm reading about databases. She's like, oh, of course you are. So like, okay, all that saying is my son is starting to like some of this technology space. He's liking computers. He loves playing on programming. So I think one of the things we're going to try and do this summer is we're going to kind of extend school for him. And so a friend, family, and I are going to have him and another young gentleman. We're going to start teaching him how to program things. We're going to start teaching him how do you use Cursor? What does programming look like? How do you build a UI? What's a website? Like a lot of the fundamentals that you kind of like, what's a component? How do you build components? So we're going to start trying to teach some of the fundamentals. Maybe there'll be another separate job in there somewhere or something else, but at least getting their hands on the technology and helping them learn it. The goal is to spend, between myself and another dad, we're going to spend some time to kind of curate some content. And then from that content, we'll have them go through some classes. There's actually a lot of free Stanford and a lot of free Harvard classes that are out there. A lot of introduction to Python and introduction to classes. You can just audit them without actually taking the credits or getting the certificate. It might be a good thing for them to go through. Like you take some of these, multiple hour classes, go through and learn what they're saying and give you some fundamentals to what this I think will be useful. So while I think the AI will do a lot of really good things for you, I think it's kind of what we're talking about today. I don't think it will give you everything. And I think you still need just some core fundamentals. Like if you're going to build websites, you'll need to know what like padding looks like and the frames and like what is a flex box. I think there's conceptual things that make sense that you should just understand how to do them. And then I think from there you can then step back and say, okay, now that I understand that concept, I don't need to write the code every time.
Yeah.
I can let the AI figure it out a little bit.
Mike, I'm a little disappointed because I want to be able to ask your son in August, how many colors belong on a report page? What's the maximum amount? Where's the Power BI? Where's the fabric in this? I've heard all the developer stuff, but where's the data transformations? ETL, all our acronyms that are fun.
I don't know if that's going to be much of a thing anymore. I don't know. We'll see.
Ooh, hot take.
I look looking at the future of things here with Copilot and what the simple things Copilot can do, I'm not sure spending a ton of time learning all the properties panel inside your Power BI report for every single visual is really useful for your time. I don't.
Son, welcome to prompt engineering.
Yeah, I'm thinking
luck.
so. So I think it's going to really shift how people do work in the future. So I'm already starting to see some trends and shifts and things, which we'll get into in I think more as we talk about this conversation. But all right, enough of that kind of very large yammering about just life and things in general. Let's move over to some news items, Tommy. What news things do you have for us today?
Yeah, we'll run through these. We have 3 good ones here. The first one we're going to start with is open mirroring explained for Microsoft Fabric. I'm really happy that Microsoft, and this is in the podcast, this is in the YouTubes and all the things, the link, but I think there's been, I don't want to say confusion, but lack of clarity for a lot of people, unless you really dived into it, on mirroring compared to open mirroring, what the difference is. And the biggest difference really is mirroring is something that has standard connections or standard sources that you can connect to. Open mirroring is a flexible approach that allows any application to write changes to Fabric. And this is useful for if you're using legacy databases, external data providers, or your own custom made one. We mentioned this on Tuesday. I wish I remember the person's name, but they used an Excel file as their open mirroring source. So it's really what your curiosity is or what you can think of can be enabled for open mirroring. I love how they kind of outline the article and talking about when to use it, database mirroring and Fabric in general, and then talk about open mirroring. So this is great. This is a great article. I think it was written.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like confusion here, especially when the way this article is written. Even I am under the understanding. Again, I'm just going to kind of throw this down here, and we'll see what happens. My understanding of like SQL DB mirroring, and maybe even mirroring for Azure Postgres.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is those two sources actually make physical copies of things and actually bring data to the lakehouse in this mirroring experience. However, I'm not sure that mirroring does the same effect inside the Databricks catalog. When I look at the Databricks catalog, it's not about I'm not physically making a copy of things and bringing them in. It's like an elaborate shortcut that goes back to Databricks, and then you can use it. Now, I haven't tested Snowflake, so I can't speak to that fully. But if Databricks is doing this whole kind of like, look, Databricks is going to manage the table. There's a bunch of files on disk that are there. And then Snowflake is also doing a very similar thing, except not with Parquet, but with Iceberg and Arrow files. So if Snowflake is also in this mix, and maybe Snowflake keeps its information inside Snowflake, and then you're getting this like shortcutting mirroring experience here. I feel like the mirroring language is a little bit, yes, mirroring makes sense. It is taking tables and bringing them to your lakehouse. Awesome. Do love that. But I think the language of the mirroring itself is kind of different between different data sources. Am I physically making a copy or am I not? And I don't know if there's a clear distinction between those two pieces.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Tommy? What I'm describing?
I think this is part of the bigger kind of concern I think a lot of people have is there are so many things to choose from, and like, well, why can't I just use shortcuts? Or I know this is right back, but okay, what about the legacy things? Like I would even call Power Apps too. Like, well, if I can do right back here, when do I use this? How do I not forget the how do you use this? It's when do I use this? When is this more valuable than X, Y, and Z? And I think that's kind of the big thing here. Open mirroring, all these things are great features, but all the different use cases are still, I think, very undefined. And I think that's kind of the bigger thing we're seeing with Fabric, where unless you spend a ton of time reading, researching, and honestly just tinkering around, it's still going to be that black box.
Yes. And this other thing here that's interesting here is when you talk about mirroring, there's also a storage in Fabric is free. So with these mirroring experiences,
this is
this is one thing I just want to point out here. I mean, the pricing model for these is you get during the mirroring experience. So let's say, okay, for example, right, you're mirroring a SQL database, right? SQL's doing things, data's coming in, and then you're making sure that the tables in your Fabric match the tables that are in the SQL server. Well, there's a certain amount of like writing, reading things. And so in lieu of this, Microsoft is giving away 1 terabyte of mirroring for free. So if you have a small SQL database,
Great. Yeah.
I don't know how fast that is eaten up for the 1 terabyte level. I've done some real-time streaming things which can eat up that terabyte very quickly. But if you're streaming real-time data, and 1 terabyte kind of goes a long way when you're doing copies of smaller tables and getting them in.
The fact too, Mike, that's not an offer for the Fabric databases, right? That's a storage cost on its own compared to the normal capacity. So
yes,
I find that interesting that they're offering this mirroring terabyte coupon, so to speak.
Yep.
Go buy your Nutella and then get a terabyte of data.
Yep.
But the fact that Fabric databases there's no trial with Fabric databases anymore, or we're getting to that point where you get it 2 gigs of a database and then you start paying for storage. You're paying for storage immediately outside your normal capacity. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting they do that. So, okay.
The only other thing I want to unpack with you here just a little bit is a stuck. It's a challenge that I seem like I face when I look at mirroring things. One of the challenges I look at when I look at open mirroring is I look at open mirroring and, okay, when things are changing on the database side, right? Let's imagine I'm bringing new records. Mm-hmm. So the concept here is you have a table, it's inside the lakehouse. And then when you use open mirroring, from my understanding, I haven't played with it enough to really get my full head around it. That is, as you update things, like a change a record, update something, you identify kind of like the keys values of it. And then the mirroring port will then automatically know, oh, you've updated this record, therefore I will update that 1 record and make all the changes for you. So it kind of does it in an efficient way, right? Yeah. I'm just going to keep bringing the mirroring all the changed records. And then mirroring just kind of figures out how to update it. Like that's really nice. It simplifies a lot of the loading of data. The one thing I'm not sure I'm very clear on is what happens when your database physically removes files or records. So this is one thing that I've always had challenge with in the past, has been like whenever you're doing a database mirroring or updating experience, you either copy the whole table, but when you have deletes, that's harder to manage because you have to compare, okay, for this given period of time, this was the list of IDs that made up that table. Mm-hmm. But then, tomorrow when I look at the same data, here's a new list of IDs that are current and valid and that have that record. So I don't really see a lot of language, and maybe this is just me not understanding mirroring very well. There could be others. Again, chat, if you are also experimenting with mirroring, what are you finding and how do you manage deleting things inside open mirroring? I'd like to understand what that means. And do I have to go through? So, something has to go through and compare what were all the IDs that I had, what are the IDs that are missing, and then at least tell them open mirroring and say, delete these IDs, right? There's got to be a point in time where you say these things are deleted. Does that make sense?
No, I mean, which again, and there was an update at the Microsoft build about workspace warehouse snapshots too, right? So that's covered there. But the fact that, there's these undefined, and honestly, unless you tinker around, Mike, like unless you're actually testing this out, how could you roll this out until you know this? Because that's a data governance issue. That's a compliance issue before you actually start getting that in production. You're talking about fundamental things that could make or break a lot of processes here. So that's a concern. And if you don't know it, it's like a known unknown. And those, I really stay away from anything production wise or anything I'd recommend to a client, because you're like, yeah, we could do it. Sounds great. Works cool. But then that situation occurs.
I just bring up that point. I wouldn't say I would not develop with it. I mean, it's not to the point where I'd say don't use it because it's not ready. I don't think that's the case. I think really the case is like, no, I'm not worried about it. That's not what I'm trying to say. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is this is something that we need to design for. So the thing is, you're going to create new records, you're going to update existing records, and you're going to delete records. Some data systems allow what they call soft deletes, right? Just the record still stays, but it's marked as deleted, and then it stays around for a period of time, and then maybe at some point it's purged. I don't know.
Sure.
But something like that, I mean, soft deletes is a great solution to resolve this one, but it also means your database could get really large and have a lot of extra records in that are being deleted do they need to stay around? Is there a period of time? There's all these other kind of like questions around the deleting side of things. Cause you, as a database manager, I don't want my database to have a whole bunch of records that I'm never going to use again. When you've said they deleted, like they're gone. So that's where I just need to understand or unpack a bit more of like how open mirroring works with the delete side of things. I feel like there should be a bit more features around, if we're doing open mirroring, there should be two queries. Yeah. There should be one to go get the data and find what records have changed. And then here's the master key list of things. And it should just kind of figure it out on the back end and join those two pieces of information together and then figure it all out. So like, that's what I think should be happening. But I don't see that in the tool, or it's not clearly called out in the tool in a way that I understand it. Does that make sense?
No, and that's what I'm saying. Not saying don't use it at all, but you have to, if you are unsure of this, you have to test this out before rolling out, like a lot of things in preview. Let's jump into Mike to the one any article that has tools in the title, I'm down. I love it. So I'm going to actually jump into the updates to the database development tools for SQL database.
Okay.
In Fabric. So again, you had me at tools. You had me at tools because anything like that is cool. So there's 4 major tools that they're really releasing for Fabric databases here, or talking about: source code integration, Microsoft SQL build projects, VS Code development updates, and some upcoming features on the roadmap, including improvements to source control, deployment pipelines, and update from source capabilities, a REST API, and further integration with the Fabric CI/CD Python module. So
that's a mouthful.
Putting a lot of work. Yeah, this is a mouthful. They're putting a lot of work into the Fabric SQL databases here. How do you want to dive into this first?
Just give me my initial opinion on this one around SQL and SQL databases inside Microsoft Fabric. So the one thing I'll kind of note, I believe the SQL community is really good. We'll just start there. I'll start with the SQL community has a really strong following. People really know how to use it. But I think the SQL community, because SQL has been around for so long, the product of SQL databases from Microsoft is very robust. There's a lot of expectations that come with that team, like those databases, like a lot of things there. And so I got to be honest, I was not a fan of working with SQL databases before Fabric SQL. I got to be really frankly honest with you. Like that was not a thing for me.
Yeah.
I don't love it.
Not new news.
I was like, why would we need this? I have a lakehouse. I have a data warehouse. Like, why do I care about the SQL databases? I do think there are some really good. I think there's some really good tooling pieces that exist. I also think this is a really good fit solution for like smaller, medium-sized datas. And one of my biggest complaints with SQL Server was like, I didn't want to go buy the SQL Server and have it stay running and on all the time. That my biggest gripe with the SQL database was, look, I've already got all these semantic models. Why do I need to turn on a database and just let it sit there eating money when I only load from it like for an hour in the morning? That's it, and I'm done. So one of the things I liked about SQL Synapse or Synapse in general was the idea that you had a SQL engine. It could talk to the lakehouse. It had the ability to read Parquet and Delta tables, but it would only read or be on long enough to just run the query and then turn off. This is what I think is happening now with this SQL inside Fabric. Like the SQL is always there. It's like an always on machine. I'm not paying for the SQL engine to run. I can start a SQL database, and only when I'm running the database does it actually charge me. This makes total sense to me. I really like this model of if I use it, I get paid for it. So now I'm much less resistant to go turn on a SQL database and just use that to read, write data from it. I think that makes a lot more sense now. Does that become your staging area for a bunch of other things in Fabric? I don't know yet. Like it's very transactional in nature. So I'm seriously looking at maybe I can add apps and build things like legit apps inside of Fabric now. And the back end of my transactional app now is part of Fabric. And I'm thinking, I'm kind of really rethinking. Like I knew this was like a thing. They made the announcement, but I'm seriously rethinking. Maybe Fabric is the place for my transactional data. Maybe Fabric is the place where I want to put everything.
It's very seamless. So I think you make 2 really good points here. The first point that a lot of people, if they're diving into SQL or if they're well dived in, again, to your point, this has been around for a long time. There's already a bare minimum expectation on features, services, and what it should provide, not just being storing rows of data. There's a lot more to this. And I think they go through that in the article. And I think they're really working to get there. The other point too, Mike, too, on the app side, one of my latest holy cow moments was when I pointed a previous existing Power App to a Fabric database. It was so seamless. It was so easy because it again, it smells, looks, and tastes like a SQL database. And the fact now that it's in Fabric too, this is to me, this was for me, we'll call it a mini game changer. Because here, I know we've talked about AI where it is. Power Apps still incredibly popular, or applications like it too. Power Automate still part of Microsoft's budget and what they're doing, and I love that. I'll say my only comment about the article here is know the audience. I think there's a lot of people who are like, I want to start using SQL. Everything in this article is for a database administrator.
Yes, it's a DBA.
Yeah, this is a DBA. There's nothing in this article.
Dude.
Nothing in this article is like, I want to be a SQL player too.
Dude, there's so many acronyms thrown around this thing, like CICD, MSQ, SQL extension tool, SQL package.net,
Object A. Yeah. Anytime
what the heck is it?
What is a DAC? Power BI. Yeah, come on.
SQL Proj, DAC Pack. Like these are all things like I don't know these things.
Ooh,
like
a SQL package. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't SQL projects. I don't. But again, this is, I mean, the reason I think you see all these complex terms, these are things to your point, Tommy. I think you're spot on. This is the DBA language. This is the language a DBA would understand and know how to manage and use these things. So I'm very excited that this is coming in, and very also excited that we have this whole, like, you can make everything go to Git and all of the items that you would need from the SQL definition and schema and deploying things. All of those can be used through deployment pipelines into, dev, test, prod workspaces. I think this is a good change. I just also feel I'm like really far behind in like the DBA side of things in SQL because I've kind of stayed away from it. I've kind of just tried to own the lakehouse side of things. And so this is adding on yet another whole big bundle of stuff that I feel like I need to go learn and be more educated around.
Mike, you got another episode I think that's a great conversation that we can dive into, is like, how much should one know about SQL if I'm playing in Fabric? Should I be a DBA, or I mean, I can get started right now in 3 clicks, but love it. So again, a lot of tooling available. Mike, one more here that is not a super long article, but I think it's going to be one of those underrated things. And
I think this is a winner here. I do think this is an underrated feature here.
Yeah, because there's not a lot to this. It's one of the smaller articles, but it's pretty big. Intelligent data cleanup, smart purging for smarter data warehouses. So smart AI, this sounds like all my smartphones back in the day. And we're basically introducing something through garbage collection with Microsoft Fabric with no knobs. I'm going to admit here, I don't know what the no knobs acronym is. Maybe is that slang for the young kids, or is that something actually has to do with data warehouses? That I've never heard before.
I think when you're acting dumb, Tommy, they call you a knob. I mean, I think that's what they're saying.
Are they saying that this not dumb Microsoft Fabric? I thought I was noob.
No, knob. Stop being a knob, Tommy. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. No knobs, no dumb people. I don't know what they're saying here.
No dumb warehouses. We don't have dumb warehouses in Fabric. But really what garbage collection has is we have storage cost optimization, which simply allows us to take certain expired data that takes up storage space and simply intelligently identifies and cleans up data files personally, which goes back to our kind of initial article about the mirroring, but this is all again in Fabric, not mirroring. Maintenance overhead, and it works with your data governance. So I think there's a lot more they're going to be doing with this. The data retention period, usually with your compliance, is 30 days, and we can't configure that, so you're stuck with 30 days now. Mike, what are your thoughts?
I mean, this is, let me give you a quick story. I had a story about a customer who was using lakehouses and doing again, this is warehouse stuff. So this is warehouse information and warehouse data. So just to be very clear, this is all about the warehouse smart purging for warehouses. But I'm going to just relate it to something else that I know in this experience of so when you separate the compute from the storage accounts, there's a lot of little small files that are being written, and potentially even when you're interacting with small little files, you're making a lot of tiny files like JSON files, and you're compacting them into tables or Delta Parquet tables. There's potentially a lot of movement. There's a high volume of files that you're working with. Storage accounts don't really like a lot of very small files. They like kind of somewhat medium or larger size files that you can just read and write one big chunk of data at a time. So that being said, this garbage collection is very important. And my customer had started a lakehouse. They had been using it for 5 years, and they're like, Michael, our storage costs are really high recently. I don't really know what's going on. It's like, well, when did you do your optimize and vacuums on their lake house? And they were like, what do you, how often should we do that? I'm like,
you knob.
I was like, yeah, you should be doing that. So we took storage costs from like almost $5,000 a month or $4,000 a month down to like less than $1,000 because no one had cleaned up the lake house in the last 5 years. Now, impressive that every transaction, multiple edits per day, was creating all these new files, and there was a huge amount of volume of data being shown up there, but they didn't need all those old files. Those files were no longer required to keep the record of whatever that table was. So I really think that Microsoft needs to provide better tooling around keeping things clean and just kind of auto optimizing things. I mean, Databricks is offering it as well. Their lake houses give it. This warehouse thing should be doing this as well. This should also be a feature of the lake house and Databricks and Spark engines. Like, materialized views, right? Materialized views should have some sort of like auto cleanup experience inside it. It should be doing these things for us automatically. And so that way I'm only storing the data that I need. And to your point, Tommy, we just need a couple knobs to adjust and say, look, I want to keep the last 7 days or 30 days, or like there should be a couple small knobs that we use that help us adjust this without having to like know all the intricacies of them. And we're not noobs anymore.
Oh, so they're metaphorical knobs. That makes actually a lot more sense.
I think that's what it is, actually.
Okay. Didn't think about that. I that's hilarious. I'm going to start using that now. Don't be a knob.
I don't think you want to use that, Tommy.
Don't be a knob. Mike, I think it's time.
Let's go.
We dive into something I cannot wait to get into with you. So
frame us out here. Frame us the main topic here. What are we talking about? What is this Copilot thing? And maybe we should even do just a quick little introduction around. Let's just talk about what Copilot Standalone even is, because this is kind of a new thing, Tommy. Like, this is a newer feature.
Right.
So let's unpack that first, maybe, and then figure out where we go to the topic.
Yeah, and for the sake of argument, I think something we'll maybe introduce more is this idea of role playing. But let's start with the idea here of the next era of Copilot and Fabric. If you've ever used Copilot in any other Microsoft product, you already know how this works. Microsoft 365 is now dedicated to Copilot pane. All Office products have a Copilot dedicated. We have dealt with Copilot that's felt for consumers, part of Power BI, but kind of it didn't really flow well because I could have it for a report. I had the pane if I had the capacity to see Copilot to talk to a report or build. A lot of Copilot features, though, have been more focused around the builders. It's built in Power Queries, available in notebooks, it's available in Data Warehouse. But for consumers, there hasn't been a lot of focus yet for chatting with your data, talking with your data, except for in an individual report. Microsoft has now introduced it in Microsoft Build 2025, the new standalone Copilot, a full screen experience, accessible as a new button or action on the left-hand pane, globally available in Power BI. And the main differences here is this standalone Copilot allows you to not worry about which report you're in. So if you want to talk about your marketing data and then go into your sales data, whatever is important, you simply have the same experience in the same location. And here's the thing that may sound minimal or not significant, but my gosh, technology changes process, and how the feature looks, where you go can change if people use it or not. So things that are available in this Copilot experience is simple things that I can ask it to do. Kind of like the Q&A feature, but obviously now we're using Copilot. And that's really, I think, the best way to, from an analogy or to understand it. And it understands metadata. It
Mhm.
understands a report name. So if you do want to specify a report, like, hey, what's my quota from the sales 2025 report? But it understands descriptions, content, visual titles, and text boxes, the workspace name, and other properties. So it's not just scanning the report and pulling in general information. If you understand some of those pieces, or you don't, it's going to attempt to intelligently pull back what you need. Also,
Mhm.
it's going to weight more other features, such as what you recently viewed, what's endorsed, or your favorites. So that customization is completely different from the Q&A feature. If you're thinking this is Q&A plus, it's not. There's a few summary features here as well. There's a whole article here, but you can still ask it to change it. So it really is the Copilot experience in Power BI. Mike, what do you think? What's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been able to really play with it in detail because it's a preview feature. So right now, you go to your tenant right now. In the early part of the article, I just want to call out, like, this is a feature that has just been announced at Build.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming in the next couple weeks. It's not there yet. I don't see it in my tenant. It may be in
Not
your
in mine
tenant.
either.
It
Nope.
may be out there eventually, but I think the idea here. So, a couple things that I think about this feature. Like, one thing that needed to happen with this was Microsoft. If Microsoft's going to really double down on the Copilot and the experience of things, they're going to need to get this into the hands of more people and make it extremely accessible. You'll already notice Copilots everywhere, all over your computer, right? If you have a Windows computer, there's now an icon on your menu bar that has Copilot 365. There's now Copilots in your Outlook. There's now Copilots in your Excel.
My
You go to
Surface has a Copilot keyboard button.
Yeah, you have a button for it now. Like, and you literally go to Paint, open up Paint. Just Tommy for a second.
I
Look at
know.
that. There's a Copilot inside Paint as well. So just in case you didn't understand how to make a line or a square or delete something, you now have Copilot inside Paint to also help you out with everything there as well.
Actually, I
So
could use that a lot for paint.
yes. So I think Microsoft is in this moment, and again, to their credit, right? To their credit as well. As I interact with apps now, AI is becoming so pervasive, so quick, that every company is trying to produce some sort of experience around an AI level feature. So much so, that's why we built an AI feature into our theme generator. So the theme generator that we do is like when you are uploading images to your wireframe and then you're adding visuals on top of that page, we've actually added our own AI on top of that to help us put the visuals where they should go in your images, to kind of help it make it easier for you to place images or visuals on a page. That's a helper mechanism, right? We're trying to build things that are going to make it easier for you to work with, like, the tools that we're building. Anywhere I see kind of text things, any AI, any tool that's like, Grok or Twitter or Adobe Express, like any product that has something where I'm entering text, I'm now expecting that tool, especially creative tools, to automatically have some sort of Copilot to help me create the wording and rewrite it and all these other things. So this is becoming standard. So all this to say is, I think this is in line with Microsoft's vision. This also aligns with their ability to take a Copilot and let you use it down to an F2 level. So I think that's also something that's been a big movement here. You couldn't really do Copilot as a native experience unless you had a capacity that users could use to talk to Copilot.
Right. And let's set it up then, because here's the situation, Mike. Microsoft has tried a lot to dealing with intelligent application like features for Power BI that, let's admit, have not taken the world by storm. All my clients, every company I've worked with, we have attempted all the AI like features in the past. Automated insights, key influencers, Q&A and dashboards. Q&A is a button. What else was out there as well? Decomposition tree, and quick insights. None of those were something that people depended or really used at all or wanted to use. And there are a lot of methods that we did, but honestly, they were, and I think we've said this, and I hate saying this because I love all the Microsoft products, it was unreliable. It did not provide something each time, or the majority of the time, that people found that they could use or act on. Now we have something here that is much more promising. I'm totally stoked for it, but let's see what the situation here in this role playing that we're going to do, where you are tasked in the next 12 months to make sure that your organization adopts the standalone Copilot for Power BI. You have some budget, you got some people, but let's say that situation where we're still in that point where the data culture is, yeah, we've done AI things with Power BI. No one's been impressed with the previous tooling. So the role play here is what are we going to do? Like, what's the process that you would implement? Obviously, here we're talking here on a, for the next 20, 30 minutes. So we're not going to go through everything. We're obviously every company's different, mid-size, small, data culture, how we assess it. But we're going to speak a little general here. But where do you start? What are the milestones that you would implement? And let's really dive into, if we were to work together here, what would that project plan look like? So at 12 months time, we have a pretty good working system of Copilot Standalone, Power BI, and our consumers.
Yeah, I like your question, Tommy, but I think I would rephrase it slightly. So
nothing new, but that's good. So.
Nothing new. We usually beat up the questions and definitions here.
This is how it works, man. It's good. It's refined.
So I feel like the question you're asking is, let me just state some things that I think you're assuming with the question. Sure. Maybe that'll just clarify what we're talking about. So just let me react a little bit, right? So this is my reaction. My reaction to your question is, you're deciding that there's a mandate that says you must use Copilot, and we have to have our whole team using Copilot to be effective as a team.
Yep.
I don't necessarily agree with that. So I think specifically Copilots or AI things in general, it's that is a solution looking for a problem. I want to think about it as a problem looking for a solution, right? So okay. I would phrase it more of the idea of like, okay, as I would look at this, I'd say, what part of my organization is struggling the most? What in our data culture is the weakest? And after I take survey of my company, my team, my people, what do they know and what they don't know? Then I step back and say, okay, now what things or capabilities can the Copilot offer me? And how can I use that Copilot to simplify or make it easier? Or I'm going to identify the skills of the team essentially, and then look at, okay, for example, when you're talking with this article from Amanda, there is the very nice, pretty like blog article, right? Hey, look, there's key insights. You can do all these things with it. But if you go read the documentation on like the chat with your data experience, right? Actually going into the documentation about what this feature is going to mean and what it can do, there's actually like what we're going to call capabilities, right? One capability is just finding stuff, search. As much as people hate using large language models for search, they're like, well, we have these, like we can index everything. We don't need it for search. For whatever reason, the first thing most people's minds go to when you talk about AI and Copilot, it's searching for things. It's summarizing context that's somewhere else, right? So, I would go through and say, look, what are my team's problems? Do we have so much content that it's difficult to find good content? Do we have so much content that's hard for people to understand like what's going on? And then as you walk through the other capabilities, like another one's like summarize a report or a topic. Okay, interesting. That might be a bit more interesting that I want to look at. Ask questions about your data. Now, again, we've done this before in the past with like the Q&A models we've had before. Have I found a lot of value from that? Probably not. That might be a capability that I will look at, I'll explore, but that may not actually be useful for my team. Using a Fabric data agent. Okay, data agents are interesting. This is a new world. I can actually change what the AI focuses on. I can pre-train the AI a little bit. I can give it some instructions on how to respond with an answer that could potentially improve the answers. So data agents might be a good opportunity for me to use that trained model with my language, what I want. And that might actually make it a better experience. So that would be something that might be useful. You could even pick what kind of data. You can pepper it. Then there's also this space of prepping data for AI. So then it moves away from its capabilities and saying you can use AI to prep the data for the AI. This is very meta at this point. But if you don't have models that are prepared well, or have all the instructions and the relationships and the descriptions, the AI has a much harder time reading the semantic model and getting out what it needs to like give you the answers. So all that to say is I'm going to really step back and say, where are the main pain points of my team? Where are the big skill gaps? What are the things that we think we just need to get better at? And then I'm really going to try and look at the Copilot in that light and say, can I build specific data agents to address those needs? Can I build specific things in Copilot? Can Copilot solve those bigger pieces? And then only when I find matches on that, then I start. And again, if I'm looking at this, I'm starting out with a small team of people that I think are going to be capable. We'll teach them how to prompt. We'll work on it. We'll do like little mini projects together. And as we learn things, we're going to refine our process. And as the process gets better, we then roll it out larger to the organization, right? Use the Copilot where it's most effective, document that, refine that, and then roll it out to the rest of the team. Like, here's where we're finding value with this Copilot thing. And I feel like that's what has been the missing gap in a lot of these other Copilot experiences. They're just like, look at cool, it's AI, it's a thing. Yeah, but it's not really solving a problem. It's just something you can do that's interesting.
And for those of you listening at home, rewind again 2 minutes for what Mike said, because Mike, what you stated, you could plug in any technology on that approach, because this is really important. And especially with anything that's hyped in the world that we live in now, it's AI. People want it all and they want it all done, but they don't know what it's going to do, what it's going to really solve. Right. And I think that's the big thing. They say, go get Copilot. Right. And I think I think that's just the mindset we have from the consulting world, or just, I think dealing with data and technology is, yeah, we could do it. But I think, what is your old saying? How, like, our job is, how do we help people make money or save money? And
everything we should be doing should either be making money or saving money. If we're not doing one of those two things with our reports, like, again, looking at the report, what does this report do? Does this report help you make money, or does this report help you save money? If it can't tie to one of those two things, does that report even need to exist?
And to be very frank, if you are tasked with just making everyone use Copilot Standalone, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. And the reason why is, honestly, you have to break it down where this is the first AI tool in Power BI that really allows some things that can do things better than other things in Power BI. And I don't think we've really had that. And to your point, Mike, you start with this project rather than, we're just going to create an adoption program. Is like, well, what does this do better? Okay, let's start with the search. Let's start with getting that quick information. Well, who could that save the most time with? Right. And I think it has to start with that type of project where you have to measure first, rather than, again, at the end of the day, organizations are not going to care that everyone's asking 100 questions a day in Copilot. That's not your success metric. It's a KPI, but it's not your success. It's not an objective. Your objective would be, how is this saving people time or making them better at what they do? That has to be reflected larger, or you're looking at this wrong. And so I love how you broke that down. So if I'm tasked with this and they come to me, I'm going to, in a sense, talk back or respond back with, well, let's break this down into who needs this the most and how do they need this the most. Easy wins are always sales teams or operations teams. And because if I want to get my quick numbers, a lot of sales have a lot of reports, a lot of, reps, agents, managers. And it's like, well, what do they do every day? Right. So usually it's trying to find accounts. Like, I feel like I've said this 1,000 times on the podcast, but like, again, if people don't want to report, it's just the best platform to do it. Well, if I could get something where I open my computer and I could see who I need to call, I could see what I need to close, or I can see, where I am to my target, and an application just popped up. That's all I need. I don't need to look at anything else. Right. Or just solve what I need to do. If I, what do I need to do today? And what do I need to know? Okay. So let's break it down there. And I think you start with teams and departments who are in critical need of those types of questions. Because to me, when I'm looking at Copilot Standalone, what it's really, I think its edge is going to be those questions. There is advanced analytical things that it can do. I wouldn't focus there right off the bat, right? Because you can do data agents, but if it can retrieve the right information quicker than going to a report, and it can retrieve it from multiple sources, that's where I'm starting. And I'm starting with people who need that the most. With that in mind, Mike, if breaking that down, how would you kind of approach it then too, as you broke it down as well, where it's like, okay, let's find a problem and build the solution. Where would you see the problem? What does Copilot Standalone do that you'd see that who could benefit the most, or services or processes that could benefit the most?
Well, let's take a so this would require okay, I'm gonna a lot of thoughts on this one. Let me try to unpack your question here a little bit. When I was working in the retail industry, there was this need to do I forget the name of it specifically, and someone on the chat here is going to actually know this one. I'm not going to be as good at chat here to know things. It's a time. I'm going to call it a time trial. It's it's an
application on your computer that
no, not necessarily, but like, I mean, in retail space, it's like, okay, look, I have a job to do, a thing. I'm going to go retrieve this product from the shelf. I'm going to go service this customer. I'm going to maintain this thing, whatever the thing is. But you basically do, I want to call it time trial, but that's the wrong language for it. I don't remember the actual term of it, but it's the idea of like, you actually do like a measured amount of time, and you say, go do this task, and you time trial how long that task takes, right? And so you basically look at the work that you do throughout the day, and then for each major buckets of tasking that you do, you identify which periods of time are taking the most. And so if you're trying to make someone's job more efficient, you look at their whole day across multiple days on the week and say, let's focus on where you're spending the most of your time. The part of your time that has the most amount of effort or time spent is usually the part that I can improve.
Yeah.
Right. If I can do something in a minute and it's not a lot of effort, well, if I can drop that from a minute down to like 50 seconds, minimal value add to my workday. I'm only saving 10 seconds here or there. Now, in some high manufacturing jobs, you're doing a lot of like time trials. It came to me. I think it's called a time trial. But the idea is you measure these things over time. And so what you want to address is, what is that large task that takes a long time, right? What is that major thing that really eats up someone's effort to do something? So to answer your question directly, I think about time trials as a way of looking at what are the people working on in your Power BI environment? What are they spending most of their times on? Are they spending most of their time in the format panel trying to get visuals formatted? Are we building a whole bunch of bookmarks in reports that are just a bear to manage and we don't know how they work and they break things? Are we always fixing things in tests because we're trying to get things out to production and it's always breaking something? Are we always fixing a data pipeline because it's unreliable, right? If I look at my team's work, and this will change over time, but I think what you're looking for here is you're looking to find what part of your users or your team's time is being most used, and then solving for that. So throwing Copilot at explain this visual to me might not save me a lot of time.
Right.
Throwing Copilot at I'm trying to understand the relationship between salespeople and customers. Here's some of my assumptions that are happening in the data. I think these are true. Can you show me graphs that would answer this kind of question? To me, that's where Copilot should be used. There should be this concept of like letting the Copilot deep think in front of you. Hey, do a deep think first. What could this mean? Let's understand the question. Like a lot of that processing, thinking out loud, I've been finding some immense amount of like value in just watching AI kind of process the question and think through answers. And I've seen some very creepy things where like the AI should be like, well, I shouldn't answer it. I shouldn't tell them this because then they'll think I'm a real person. I don't want to let them know that I'm a real person. And then and it's just creepy stuff.
Like, why not? Huh? Can you actually explain that?
I'm going to change my answer because I don't want the person on the other end of this to know that I'm thinking. Like it does weird things like that. So it's quippy or whatever. It doesn't make a difference. But when I look at this and I'm going to myself, I'm thinking, wow, this is very interesting what it can do. I think it's that kind of stuff. It's the stuff that can dovetail your existing work, and I want to identify the 1 hour project.
Right.
The 2 hour thing that I'm doing. Can I cut that down in half? Can I take something that normally took me a week to do, and can I make it a couple minutes or a couple hours? Let me just, by extension, give you an example. I had a website. I was trying to add Google Analytics, and I didn't think it was working correctly. The Google Analytics wasn't firing off as fast as I thought it should. So as I was working on the code, something in the code was definitely having a problem. So I was trying to add Google Analytics. I spent about 4 hours trying to add it correctly into my static web app. It wasn't working very well. And it maybe works, maybe it doesn't. I don't really know. I said, look, I'm going to start over. And so I bought Cursor. I said, I'm going to learn a little bit of this AI stuff. And I'm going to use a large language model and just start playing with it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is I made a web page. I then made a Google Analytics on that page. It was rendering as needed. It was fast, seemed to work as expected. Then I started adding details and other options and other pages and other clicks on the page. So I was able to, in the same period of time where I struggled with one single small feature, I was able to rebuild the entire app using an AI agent. So it basically took like a week's worth of time and condensed it down to 4 hours of time to build a full website with all the details I needed on there. I was impressed. I was like, this is amazing that it could do this. So it's those kind of efforts, right? It's where I can spend $20 or $50 per person and take work that was taking me a week to do. I can get it done in a couple days or a day. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for.
And I would argue, though, that's still thinking in the developer role, not the consumer role of what this Copilot's doing. And I think we'll explore that in a future episode.
Well, that's my example of how I've used it. But I think the same principle exists. Like the principle is still there, right?
Consumers are going to have a much more limited feature set available to them in Copilot Standalone compared to what you can do in Cursor or with all those models, right? Because
I don't even care about the features. All I care about is what is the very large thing of time that you're taking. Like that analogy still fits. So, I'm looking at it from a developer lens. Like this thing that I would develop typically was very complicated and I didn't know how to study the code to write it all. I'm taking this very complex thing and then giving it to an AI agent, and it's outputting to me maybe not as clean of a code, but it's outputting me something that's functional and it gets me to the answer. So, what is that, to your point, Tommy? What is that? What is that time consumption thing for the end consumer?
Right.
What does that look like? And I think that's where I want to see these AI agents go. And until I really get my hands on it, I'm not sure if I'm there yet.
And I think the biggest thing is, this is what I want to dive into another day. I can't believe we're already close to time. A lot of the article has a pretty elaborate part of prepping your data, because here's the thing. We can talk about rollout. And I do want to do that in a future conversation on what does that look like. But I think we need to really talk about the prep here, because here's the thing. I don't care what model it's using. It could use Claude 8. That's not even out yet. But the biggest thing is this is different because it's using a semantic model or multiple semantic models to render whatever the answer is. So you could have ChatGPT 8 and ChatGPT 25. That's not going to be out for another 10 years. Doesn't matter. It's not going to work if we don't prep our data. And that's going to be my biggest concern when we're talking about this is, regardless of the tool that I'm using, if I'm connecting to my semantic model, I need to verify two things. And this is going to be my closing thought. And I think, like I said, I'll lead into another conversation another day. The two things are this is, I'm not rolling this out or really introducing this unless I have vetted a semantic model and what's going to be used. Because here's the thing, I promise you, like just like everything else that hasn't worked, we have never had ability to customize and weight a model for AI, which is probably why it's never worked or caught on. So I don't care if it's Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or Anthropic or Google or whatever. If the data is bad or not weighted and ready for AI, this is not going to catch on. So that's number one, where I am going to be very lenient on who gets access to this, even when it becomes a feature in Power BI. Number two, my number one focus on rolling this out is that focus with my team to get a vetted data set. Now, questions on whether it's certified or not, we'll discuss that another day. But the biggest thing is use something fundamental And then it's going to have to start with a small group, because here's the thing. All the things we're talking about here to me are a non-starter unless I can vet, in a sense, prep my data comprehensively for AI, because it's not something that's going to take on, because AI is not going to know, Copilot's not going to know what to do. So we can't expect a lot from the consumers. This is the weight's on us. The weight's on us on building this, not on the consumers to catch on more than ever on this, because I can't expect them to know a visual property. I can't expect them to know the metadata. That's not their job. And again, if I don't have that ability to do that, this is not something I'd roll out. If I haven't done that, that's not something I'm rolling out. All that being said, we'll tie a nice little bow around this. Is, for me, my number one focus with this tooling is, what are we going to vet? What data we're going to use that's going to provide, Mike, to your point, to get someone to the answer or to the solution that they're trying to do in the quickest amount of time. That's the models I'm focusing on. And I'm spending a lot of time prepping that. And that's where we start.
Yeah, I agree. I think the prepping of data is going to be good. Again, I don't even know what to prep yet, even, right?
Yeah.
How to prep it, what kind of language I should be using, right? Do the descriptions get a standard description for human readable things, but do we also add some AI language in there as well? I don't know. Like, you're going to get, this is an uncharted territory. It's like a new science of things, right? You have to figure out what's going to work well for your team. Right. And I don't know what was going to work very well yet. I have some suspicions around that. But also, if I look at this going, I'm going to go back to, is this lemon worth the squeeze? Right. So I guess my final thought on this one is really, I want AI and Copilot things to tackle the things that my team spends the most amount of time on.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue, when I work with organizations, many of the long pull running things are semantic models aren't always in the right shape. We don't really understand the requirements very cleanly for the questions we want to answer. Some of the questions we ask of the AI doesn't have data in the semantic models yet, so we need to identify what that is. So I'm going to focus my attention on trying to understand in the early stages is what can the AI do? And then I would like to also emphasize a lot of these time trial experiences. Let's make sure we really understand, where is our team spending the most amount of time on what tasks? And then going back to, from that list of items, of high, long running items, what of those things can I use in AI to help me use that experience? Maybe it's for the end consumer. Maybe it's for the report developer. Maybe it's even for the data engineer. I mean, I think if you think about the more technical parts of this, the things that are more structured and more known, AI is really good with code, because it's a very, like, you write it right and it works. If you write it wrong, it won't work. You write it well, it goes fast. You write it bad, it goes slow. Like, it's very measurable, I think. And I think that's why AI is doing a good job there. I also think AI does a really good job in the creative space. Like, it doesn't really have clear boundaries or clear direction. Like, make me an image that has these things in it. Like, you can kind of be a bit, loose with the requirements. Those kind of things seem to be a good fit for AI. Being very precise and making a visual or a chart that gives me exactly what I want, maybe a little bit less useful to end consumers, right? So at the end of the day, I think what Copilots are going to do is they're going to make the complex simple. It's going to make these complex things easier to consume for a general consumer. So who's to say we can't talk to a Copilot? Well, who's to say we can't click on a visual and have Copilot simplify it or remove things or change the style of something based on talking to it? Like, those are the kind of things I look at. I look at a lot of these YouTube channels that do really rich, awesome, highly stylized visuals. Like, hey, I'm writing this custom DAX measure that highlights this one bar when you click on it. Cool. I don't want to learn how to do that. Why can't the Copilot learn how to do that? Like, I should be able to talk to the individual visuals and say, hey, Copilot, I want you to highlight the selected bar. And the Copilot says, oh, you need a measure. I'm going to set this up. Here's the conditional formatting. It should just rip that out. Yeah. And so that's the kind of stuff that, like, I don't want to be a technical expert in this area. I want the Copilot to figure that stuff out. So that's, I'm trying to find, I want to talk to the AI in concepts, right? I'm a sales manager. Which one of my customers are most likely to churn? the AI should rip through the data and say, here's a list of customers you should contact today, because these are the ones that are most likely to not be a customer in the next week. Okay, I now have my action plan. I then use my personal skills and go talk to all those people. So that's the kind of stuff that I think we want AI to go do, is like, there's a lot of data to go sift through, and I need to be able to ask very pointed, actionable things, and the AI should be able to guide me or provide some value in some direction or another. So it's that kind of stuff that I wish I could get the AI to do more of. So all this to say, Tommy, back to your question. How do we roll this out? I am going to figure out what my team knows and what they don't know. I'm going to figure out what the AI can do and what it does well. And then I'm going to try to align my team's long-running tasks against what the AI can do quickly. And I'm going to see how well that blends. If it blends really well and I can find immense value from Copilot, then yes, I'll light it up. But this is a value proposition. Does the Copilot add enough value for the cost that I'm going to incur based on the CU usage? What does that balance look like? I'm going to read a little bit into the future here a bit, and I'll say, I would guarantee you in a couple months, we're going to have a lot of people on the internet saying, oh, this Copilot thing is interesting, but it's using all my CU and it's not adding enough value. So there's going to be a pullback from this that's going to require people to understand a bit more around, where does this Copilot thing sit, and is it really valuable for my team? So that's kind of where I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, dude, I think there's a ton more here, but we got to end, unfortunately.
Sounds like another episode coming up.
I think.
All right. That being said, thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate your ears on this podcast. I hope you found this interesting and the Copilot topic to be fun to talk about and discuss here. There's a lot of new developments coming. We're just trying to unpack where it makes the most sense in our organizations. We hope you're finding this as a valuable thinking or thought exercise. Maybe you can take away some of this as well and use it in your organization also. Let us know in the chat if you are using Copilot, and if you have any additional questions or topics as well. You can also go to Power BI Tips/podcast and also ask your questions there as well. Please share this with somebody else if you like this conversation. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Share with a friend, since we do this for free. If you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Powerbi.tips social media channels.
Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.